Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. Welcome to the Candy Virtual Conference focused on DE and I. I'm extremely thrilled today to have the opportunity to be joined today by one of our customers, Dell, who has an incredible story to share around how their talent acquisition team is working to meet its bold diversity goals and truly change the face of the technology industry as a result. But rather than boring you with a dozen of slides, we're going to keep this a casual conversation between Gabe and I with a few key takeaways that I'm sure will spark ideas for yourself, give you some tips on how you can make progress within your own organization, regardless of where you are in your DE&I journey, and obviously give you a chance to ask questions towards the end. So we're going to be talking today about how Dell's TA team is changing the face of tech. With that, I'm pleased to announce and introduce our speaker for today, Gabe Rodarte Miller, Diversity, Talent, and Acquisition URM Pillar Lead over at Dell. With more than 25 years of experience, Gabe is no stranger to the world of recruiting and talent acquisition. For the last 14 years, he has served in various roles on Dell's talent acquisition team. And since 2019, Gabe has led Dell's diversity talent acquisition efforts, where he's responsible for developing programs and implementing ideas to attract more diverse candidates and helping Dell reach its ambitious DE&I goals. Welcome, Gabe.
Thank you, Pankaj. It's such a pleasure to be here. And those of you that are tuning in for this session, so excited to have this conversation.
Thank you. And my name is Pankaj. I am one of the founders of Sense. Sense is a talent engagement platform, which to me is the most important part of the candidate journey today. How engaged do we keep them when they first apply to you, and then throughout the recruiting process, and then of course, once they become an employee. So I have the pleasure of having the conversation with Gabe today, and I'll intersperse with a few of my own observations every now and then. But Gabe, let's start by, just setting a framework for everybody who's listening today. You're responsible for essentially changing the face of technology at Dell through talent acquisition. How did you get started? Like, what goals did you set for the business and for your function? I could imagine setting goals at the beginning was difficult. So share with us how you set up these diversity goals and how these goals guided how you went about through the process.
Yes, thank you for the question. So for me, diversity has always been part of my fabric. Being a Latino, part of the LGBTQ plus community, for me, it's always been important to see myself at a company where I'm working at, even before Dell. So I've always wanted to set that example for individuals that are interested in coming to Dell Technologies. I've worked really hard to really give opportunities to have a diverse pool of candidates to our managers. And a lot of the goals started off personally. Like, I wanted to make sure I increased the percentage of candidates introduced to our managers. But then, 2019 came around, and towards the end of 2019, our great leader, Michael Dell, came up with some very aggressive goals for us. So what we're calling our Dell 2030 Moonshot Goals. Our Moonshot Goals cover many areas. First of all, we've got sustainability. We want to make sure as a company that we're being greener. So we're making sure that all our packaging, shipping is recyclable. We also have introduced recycling across the world of electronics. It doesn't necessarily have to be a Dell product. It could be any product, but a way to recycle that and reuse and repurpose. We have very aggressive goals for cultivating inclusion, which we're going to go into in detail in just a moment. We also want to transform lives. We want to affect 1 billion lives minimum or more through our technology, helping with education and healthcare. And then very importantly, security. It's important for all of us. We live in a very digital world. We do a lot of transactions online. We want to make sure the companies that we're working with are providing the best security to their customers. So consumers, as you and I, if you go and put in your credit card number, you want to make sure that's safe and secure. So each of these goals are very important to making us a better company and better service to our customers and our employees. But to talk about a little bit more about inclusion, I want to talk about our specific goals for inclusion. So a great big goal was set out for 2030 in changing our workforce. We want by 2030 to 50% of our workforce globally and 40% of our people leaders to identify as women. That is a huge number because first of all, women in tech, it's usually very low. So to say we're going to do half of our workforce to be women, it's very aggressive. But it's something that I think needs to be done. We need to be able to open the door and provide that opportunity where many times it's not just hiring the same type of person, it's hiring more diversity, more different frame of thought, and so forth. For the US specifically, we did also include a goal of hiring 25% of our workforce and 50% of our leaders to be Black, African American, and Hispanic Latino minorities. So this is also important, going back to that first thought I said, is like, hey, we want to be able to see more of ourselves here. Be able to say that we are a company that values all kinds of backgrounds, that values all kind of input. So for us to have these goals is something that we definitely are, one, being held accountable to, but also being able to say, okay, we can now start implementing programs and working with partners that are going to help us get with those goals. And it's a common theme across the company, where it's not just one department saying, okay, I'm going to do this, or one department saying, oh, maybe I'll do that, and so forth. No, it's a combined effort where hiring managers, culture, diversity, and inclusion, talent acquisition, and ELT leaders are all working together to get to these goals.
So Gabe, I'm absolutely surprised at these goals. I mean, these are huge. 50% of the workforce to be women, 25% of them to be minorities. How did you and your team react to these goals or metrics once they were set by Michael Dell? I mean, did you even think these were achievable?
Oh, yes, definitely. So I think the first reaction was like, this is great, this is wonderful. But then, oh, okay, how are we going to do it? How are we going to get there? What are we going to do differently that we're not doing now? And before we really got going, the main thing that really came across to all our team members was these goals are out there to get us to a better spot. So even if we didn't hit these goals, we at least are better off than where we started. So that's one thing to keep in mind. Yes, we always want to hit our goals.
Great point.
But when it comes to diversity, if you're here and then you got here but didn't get all the way over here, that's okay, because at least you moved the needle.
Yep. Now, it's also interesting that these goals came directly from your CEO. And since he's the CEO, can you talk a little bit about like what level of executive support is important when creating goals of this nature and ensuring success in diversity programs?
I mean, executive support buy-in is very, very key to any goals that you're going to have for your company. So being that it came from the very top made it very easy for us to say, hey, now we have this directive, let's go after it. And knowing that it wasn't just, here you go figure it out, it's on you. No, it was more of like, okay, we're going to work together. We don't know exactly how we're going to do it. And it's not just on one team to figure it out. Hiring managers are panicking a little bit. Now I have to become a diversity expert. Recruiters are panicking like, oh, I have to become an expert in diversity as well. No, it was really a combined effort to say, okay, we've got the support. Let's build the infrastructure to get these goals going. And it was really affirming to say, okay, we can do this because we know it's supported all the way to the top, from the top.
Got it. So you're basically saying reality sets in.
Yes.
So we all know setting goals and actually achieving them are two different things, completely difficult at times. Can you talk us through how you went about putting some of the frameworks in place to start moving this needle, as you talked about? Like, how do you go from here to here on your journey to go all the way here? And how did you overcome, some of the obstacles along the way?
Yes, definitely. So, there was goals within our teams as well. So we're not going to get a 50% in 1 year. It's going to be a 10-year process. And that was one thing that we needed to stress to everybody. Don't panic. We're not going to do it right away. We want to make sure we sustain it. And, honestly, our first obstacle was COVID. 2020 came around and we really halted hiring. So we lost a year towards these 10 years of hitting these goals. But it was one of those things where it also gave us the opportunity to really refine our programs, who we wanted to work with, how we're going to do it, and so forth. Hiring managers were eager, but they were also like, no, but I know what I like. I know who the right person usually is. They tend to hire the same people. you know, just that mind frame. You got to
Right,
get over
right.
that bias. And then also at the same time, they were like, oh, does that mean I can only hire women, Black or Latino? What about everybody else? So there was some education there to say, no, that's not what that means. What that means is we're going to work towards that. You're still hiring the best person at the end of the day, but not feel like it's mandated you must hire, but feel like what we're going to do as a team, we're going to support that by bringing you more diverse candidates, by giving that opportunity to folks that we maybe we're not reaching out to. It's great to say, hey, we're Dell Technologies. Everybody knows us. People automatically want to come work here. There's some truth to that, but there's also, we have to go out and reach out to the candidates where they're at. So many things that we had to do that. So even just making some changes of, traditionally we would look at four-year colleges, making a change of, hey, we're going to look for individuals that got their associate's degree. Why not? Look at programs that provided certifications, apprenticeships for some of our roles that, as much as we would love people to have the degree, it's like, is it really necessary to do some of these roles? So for example, like our tech support or our inside sales roles,
Right.
where by going to some of these apprenticeships and certification programs where the minorities are,
Yeah.
we were able to start looking at, hey, let's change the mind of managers.
Yeah.
And let's consider that so that we can start hiring more.
Got it. Got it. Super helpful. So, all right. So you have the goal setting, you have a little bit of a framework. Let's maybe move on to talking about, so, how did you get started? Like, you've set up your goals, you're enabling your teams, you're hiring managers to support these goals. So maybe like walk us through how you got started, how you determined what were the best sort of starting points to drive success.
Definitely. So a couple of things that fell into place, not just within our team, but outside of our team. So one of them from the CDNI team was a program that we have. It's called Be the Change. So it's a training for all Dell employees. So it's talking about just, unconscious bias, diversity, inclusion, just to think really differently in your everyday life. And then specifically for our hire managers, we did a license to hire program. So basically, if you're hiring, you want to go through this training, which covers, the whole gambit of the hiring process, being more, as you're going through your job descriptions, to be more deliberate of, using more general terms, for example, looking beyond the appearance. If you get somebody shows up with pink hair, so what? They have the experience, consider them and so forth. In, even use of pronouns, which is, something that's very important to a lot of individuals, especially, the younger crowd that's coming up now, and they see it more. It's more natural for them, and it gave them a different perspective. Within our talent acquisition team, we set up ourselves with a structure to really help our diversity. So we have different pillars. I lead the underrepresented minority pillar, which includes Latino, Black, and LGBTQ+. We have a pillar that focuses on gender. We have a pillar that focuses on disability, and we have a pillar that focuses on veterans. So our pillar leads, what we do is we work with different companies where we know we can find that type of talent.
Right.
Find those opportunities where we can hire the, not the traditional candidate, and be able to really show our recruiting teams and our managers, like, here's a great partner. This is the type of candidate we can get by partnering with them. Or we go to a conference and we meet hundreds of people, be able to go through all those candidates and screen them down to our managers, get a handful of candidates that are diverse, that are qualified, and it really helps them out instead of having to review all these resumes and so forth. So our pillars have been our backbone to getting things going. But within the pillars as well, we have our inbound sourcing team supporting us, the pillar leads, to go and through and review and screen all those candidates that we're meeting so that we are presenting diversity to our managers. We started an ambassador program. This was an opportunity for Dell employees and specific employees from our employee resource groups to be able to have conversations with our candidates. These conversations had nothing to do with the actual interview process. It was, let's talk about Dell, what it is to really work here. For example, working mother wants to talk to another working mother,
Right.
to get that feeling of what it is to be able to handle being, at work, having kids and whatever and so forth. And it really helped do something different for candidates, to talk to another Latino, to talk to another Black person and so forth, to give them a sense of what our culture really is. That's been a very tremendous help to us. And I think it's helped us really stand out because I don't know of any other company that's doing something like that.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I don't know of very many other companies who are doing this. So let me ask you this in the interest of those companies. A lot of our customers tell us that diversity is absolutely a top priority for them, but it's often difficult to sort of get the fabric of diversity woven into everything that the company does. You can have, it's one thing to have a goal, but it's completely different to make sure that everybody's thinking about it, or this is a component of every sort of hiring manager's thought process. So can you maybe talk to us a little bit about how you sort of weave this into, the very sort of fabric of your organization?
Definitely, it takes a team. And it's one of those things to know that, our hiring managers are, looking to hire somebody. And sometimes they want to hire as fast as they can.
Right.
Which we get it. We understand they need the individuals there to keep the business going and so forth. But we also value taking a little bit of time to pause and say, let's go ahead and look at the right sources for us to bring that diversity. So some of the things that we looked at was, okay, hiring managers, the license to hire program that I mentioned. And let's partner up with recruiting, talent acquisition, and the diversity talent acquisition team. Also with CD&I teams to see what things we can be doing to, really give different opportunities to other individuals. It's very important that managers also look at, do I really need to have this role in a certain location? For the longest time, it was you have to be in Austin or you have to be in the Boston area where our two main locations are. Well, we were already trending remote, before 2020. And then, of course, everybody had to go remote. But that mentality changed. There's people that said, I would never work remote, that are like, oh, I don't know why I didn't work remote before. But it opened up the candidate pool across the US to say, hey, it doesn't matter where you're at, you work where you're from. And it gave us a good opportunity to increase that. Gave us an opportunity to work with our HR business partners as well to say, hey, what are you hearing? Let's prepare ahead of time instead of in the moment, like we need to hire now and we'll move. If we're part of the process, we're woven in there to have those conversations. We can be ready ahead of time,
right?
So that we're not in a panic mode, and be able to report back to teams and saying, hey, this is how you're doing as far as your hiring, introducing, ways to increase the diversity. One, we want to make sure there's diversity on the hiring team, that individuals can see, hey, we do have diversity here. We also want to make sure that for every position we have open, we introduce at least one diverse candidate to increase the ability of that diverse candidate being hired. Now, some teams have upped it a little bit more to at least two, which is great. But even just introducing one candidate in the process has increased the number of diversity hires that we've had. So there's little things that you can change, but also know that we can talk about it. It takes a village, to use that term, and be open about it and be able to adjust as we go along. Sometimes we have to say, you know what, that partner's not really working out for us, but let's see where else we can go and so forth, to be very open about it.
Yeah, but I love these examples because they're super specific, right? I mean, this idea that if you're not going to have a diverse interview panel, first of all, you're probably subconsciously or unconsciously, I guess, not hiring a diverse candidate. And even if you were open to it, maybe the candidate isn't getting a good vibe about just working at your company, where this person's like, hey, this is a very non-diverse place. So just making those tiny changes, they just seem
Right.
like very specific and actionable things we can do. So I
Definitely.
gotta ask you this. I mean, obviously, I think one of the most important things in the recruiting process today, regardless of who you're recruiting, is technology. And I know you use Sense. Can you maybe, talk for a minute or two about how Sense helping you, achieve some of these goals?
Yeah, Sense is wonderful. I think it's very helpful for us. And the fact that being such a large organization, we get so many candidates. I mean, sometimes more than we know what we do with. So with automation of communications, that's very helpful. For example, I'll go to a recruiting event, come back with 400, candidates, information, resumes, and so forth. And to automate the message like, hey, we're interested in talking to you. Thanks for stopping at our booth. Go ahead and schedule some time with us. We'll have a screening call and have that automatic follow-up and giving time to our inbound sourcing team to really just have conversations versus spending time of sending messages and so forth. I think that's very important. We've also are looking at including communications out. So we have so many managers that come back and say, hey, I have 2 3 great candidates, I have to choose one of them. Okay, well, great. What about the other two or the other person, your silver medalist? Like, we can start communications with them. Obviously they're interested and they were really good, but also pressing our managers, hey, okay, you didn't select this one, it was a close call,
Right.
where would you recommend them for? And be able to immediately follow up with that candidate to keep them engaged and keep them interesting. So, and texting, we've never done texting with candidates before, and we've been getting a great response, actually more of a response through text. So that's
Right.
great too. So really great automation and saving us time.
Thank you. Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I mean, I'll double down on that for anybody who's listening, to say that, this idea that you can use an AI powered chatbot or text messaging also ensures that everybody is getting a consistent message and a consistent experience. So everybody's being treated the same. And specifically, if you're using a chatbot, you're actually reducing any bias that you might have.
Right.
You're not saying, hey, I only want a male for this role, or I don't want somebody who's older. The chatbot doesn't have that bias.
Correct.
All right, Gabe, we're pretty close to time we've got, so I'm going to throw a last question at you for like 90 seconds. Can you give top 3 pieces of advice to our listeners today on, what should your fellow talent acquisition leaders in the DEI and DE&I space be focused on?
Yeah, definitely. So one, set goals, even if it's not a company-wide goal within your teams, to say, hey, we're going to be deliberate in making sure that maybe, for example, in some cases, we're going to introduce one diverse candidate for each interview that we're going to do for a requisition. Set goals for your team and hold yourself accountable to try to get to those goals. But again, as I mentioned at the very beginning, even if you don't get there, you've at
Yeah.
least moved the needle. Job descriptions, let's be more neutral, gender neutral on those job descriptions, and also looking at, do you really need these requirements? Does it require a degree? What's the difference if you don't have a degree, maybe more experience? That will help open up the diversity as well. And as I talked about silver medalists before, they're, just as good of a candidate as anybody else. They're interested, strike while they're hot. It's kind of how I look at it. We can always find something else. We've even had opportunities where even a manager didn't have another role, they went and created it because they really like the candidates.
Yeah, these are absolutely awesome. I mean, I love how eye-opening this session has been for me, Gabe, and I hope that's the same it has been for our audience, because a lot of these goals are just things that you can put in practice tomorrow. In fact, I know we'll do some of those, just mandating to have one diverse candidate in every position that we are interviewing for, make sure that our hiring panel itself is diverse, and make sure that we celebrate sort of small wins as we go along.
Exactly.
So thank you, thank you so much for being on. And with that, we'll wrap up our session, but we'll open it up to our audience for any questions. Gabe and I will both stick around. I'm happy to pose your questions to Gabe if you want to put them up in the chat window. So we'll take some of your questions, but with that, thank you so much for spending this time with us. And Gabe, thank you again.
Yeah, you're welcome. It's been a pleasure. Please reach out if there's any questions as well to our emails that are on the screen. We'll definitely take them as well.
Thank you very much.